By show of hands, I'm just curious, how many of you guys either are in the fitness space, own a gym, are an entrepreneur of some type? Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys own gyms of some nature? Okay, cool, just curious. The last couple of years have been pretty tough if you've been in the gym space. And one of the things I wanted to discuss today is the carryover between lessons that I've learned through competing professionally in CrossFit, going through COVID, and then also learning lessons when my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia back in 2016. I think there's some common threads and lessons that I think we could take away. And I think as an entrepreneur, hopefully you guys can have some tangible things that I lean on for your businesses or as you grow. I don't want to take full credit for these lessons. Early in my career as a CrossFit Games athlete, I had some struggles, in particular with understanding this idea of my focus, understanding what was in my control versus out of my control. There's supposed to be a really cool picture here, but it didn't really work out that way, and that's okay. But how many of you guys watched the 2009 or 2010 CrossFit Games? Anybody ever see me pass out before or like do this Amanda workout where I ended up on the floor doing snatches? Anybody ever seen that? What was happening for a lot of years as a professional athlete was I was too worried about things that were outside of my control. Before I went on to the event, I would be worried about what Rich Froning was doing. I'd be worried about what the event was going to be. I'd be worried about other competitors. And it took a lot of bandwidth from me. So when I actually got onto the competition floor, sometimes I wouldn't perform well because I was focusing on things that were outside of my control. And so I met with the sports therapist, and one of the most important lessons that he taught me that then carried over really well into my daughter's diagnosis is he asked me to take 2 circles and put it on a piece of paper. And he said on the piece of paper, right, put a circle on the left, put a circle on the right. The one on the left is in your control, the one on the right is out of your control. And take a stressful situation in your life, whatever it may be, right? In my case, I was trying to win the CrossFit Games. And before your event, write down all the things that are in your control. For example, double knotting my shoes. Yes, that's a thing, right? What is my meal plan going to look like? What is my preparation going to look like? But what's out of my control is what my other competitors are going to do. And every day leading up to the CrossFit Games, I would reflect on those 2 circles, and it put me at ease and allowed me to perform better and ultimately get back on the podium at the CrossFit Games. But those lessons learned and understanding on focusing on what's on your control carried over really well. In January of 2016, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. And for the next couple of years, we had a really challenging, difficult time. But I leaned on those lessons learned, understanding what was in my control and out of my control, not only on the competition floor, but with her diagnosis. And I did the exact same thing. I took 2 circles. I started putting down all the things that were in my control. For example, educating myself, et cetera, versus out of my control, which was other things, a lot of things actually. And when COVID hit for us in the gym business a couple of years ago, I don't know if you guys remember, March 2020, I felt like a bag of bricks fell on top of my head. A business that I worked so hard for so many years to build up in our brick and mortar was tumbled overnight. And I had to remind myself through the last couple of years to lean on those previous experiences, that it was out of my control. Whether I lived in California, they had tremendous, mask mandates. It was out of my control that the government shut me down. What I needed to focus on to be the proper leader that I needed for our team was to focus on what was in our control. And ultimately, after 2 years of COVID, our revenue dropping 7 figures, getting sued twice, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're in a better position today than we were pre-COVID. I think one of the major factors was recognizing what was in our control and leaning into that more. I really wish there was a picture. That's my daughter. It wasn't supposed to look this way, but this was supposed to be a picture underneath the focus, just saying that with the diagnosis, I was focused on her cure. The power of positivity. So I'll leave it on this one, actually. So the power of positivity. Again, there's some common threads that cross along. Do you guys all exercise pretty often? Yeah? How many of you guys coach? Anybody coach? Yeah? Now, do you ever coach anybody and tell them that their legs should be hurting, that they should be out of breath? Do you ever remind them of how they should be feeling in a negative way? You probably don't, right? You probably say things like, hey, drive your knees out, keep your weight in your heels. You probably reinforce with positive things. But for some reason, when we're training ourselves, we always revert to the negative. I don't know why, it just happens. And so one of the life lessons that I learned through competing at the CrossFit Games, and that carried over into COVID and et cetera, is the power of positivity. And so something that I do on a daily basis, and I think that in your gym is a great opportunity, I do this with my kids as well, is through micro adversity, try and reinforce positive self-talk. So the next time you're in the garage, the next time you're at the gym, and you tell yourself, my legs hurt, try and instantly revert that into some type of positive thing, like, hey, find your heels, keep your chest up, whatever. And what you'll find is that your performance will be better there, but it also carries over into real life. A really good example is the night that my daughter was diagnosed. My wife took me outside the room, and she's like, listen, you could cry all the tears you want. At that point, I was definitely crying. She's like, you could cry all you want, but when you're in front of Ava, right, there are no tears. And from that day, for the next 2 years, there was never any tears in front of her, because the power of positivity it goes through, and people can pick up on that energy. And I work that energy in the garage, in the gym. I develop it through this micro adversity that then transferred over really well into actual practical life through competition, and then again in the hospital. But it also then reflects into COVID. Here we are in COVID, and I'm on calls with our team, and I'm trying to inspire them. But they could pick up on when we're not positive, we're not in the right mindset. I received a call afterwards from one of our conference calls with the team, and the gentleman said to me, he's one of our top leaders, he's like, hey man, I just need to ask you, like, is everything okay? And the problem was that I was not in a positive mindset. I was playing the victim. I was playing the victim of COVID, right? And I needed to reframe that, because it wasn't good for me and it wasn't good for our team, especially if you're a leader in your industry or a manager. They want to look up to someone who has that positive mindset, and the power of it is incredibly important in your business, also in competition. Strengthen your why, values, and your team. I'm going to leave it on this one as well. I was graduating from college. I went to a 4-year university. Prior to that, I went to a junior college because I didn't get accepted in the 4-year university, but it's all good because my wife and I ended up graduating from the same school at the same time, whether I went to a junior college or not. But leading up to graduating, I was interviewing for different positions. And I interviewed for a finance position. And I walked in there and I gave it what I thought was the best interview of my life. And the woman said to me, she's like, listen, I think you did a great job, and I'll move you on to the next stage. But when you come back, can you wear a better suit? And I remember thinking to myself, like, I did everything in my core. This is my best suit. This was my best interview, but it wasn't enough for her. And I remember leaving there and thinking to myself, like, I don't want to wear a suit. I want to make an impact on people's lives. I want to help people in the gym to live freely and fully outside the gym. And at the time, I was working at a conventional gym, was introduced to CrossFit. And it was at that moment when this woman told me that I needed to wear a better suit, that it transferred to me that I was just going in the wrong career. And so I called my dad, and I ended up opening a gym the next day. I was signing a lease, and then I won the CrossFit Games, and some other stuff happened. But when the gyms were shut down March 2020, about 6 months later, I was like heartbroken. I know some of you guys in here have felt this. We have one of our locations that was closed for 13 months. 13 months. Another one of our locations, 9 months. And I remember walking into the gym one day, and I saw one of our members back in the gym. And she came up to me and she just reflected on how important the community in the gym and our coaches were for overall health and wellness. And it reminded me of my why, of why I started in the first place. And things are going to get really tough in entrepreneurship. It's going to be really difficult. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs as we've gone through COVID. But if you reflect back on the reason why you started, and if it's a strong reason why you're there in the first place, more than likely you'll continue on. And that is the exact same thing that I reminded myself competing at the CrossFit Games. You're suffering so much that if you're in there for money, fame, whatever, you're just going to give up, right? But if you have a deeper internal reason why you're doing it, and the same thing with business, then when things get difficult, you'll continue to push on. So for those of you who are thinking about pursuing, opening a business, I would reflect on a few things. Like, why are you doing it in the first place? And what is going to make you uniquely credible to be successful? Those are really important key things to think about. And then again, create your core values and create a team around you, looking for the people who could hook you up with the who, not how. Stealing from Juliet. So far we've talked about understanding what's in your control. Utilize those 2 circles. I think that's really important for business. Remaining in a positive mindset. I think that's incredibly important, especially to rally your team around you. And reminding yourself of why you started in the first place as a good piece when things get difficult. But this isn't a hobby at all. It's a business. Through COVID, our business, NCFIT, we have 3 verticals: corporate wellness, digital, and brick and mortar. Our brick and mortar lost 7 figures in revenue. That was a really big hit. And with that, we have now been sued twice from our landlords. And so I bring that up only to say that this is not a game. It's not a hobby. It's a business. And with that, you need to approach it with that same mindset of being a pro and diving deep and becoming an expert and becoming the most credible individual you can at whatever you're doing and staying focused on that one particular thing. Anytime in our career that we've tried to divert from our core competency, we've failed. And so I'd recommend for all of you guys, as you guys get into the fitness space or you're entrepreneur and whatever you're doing, think about what you're uniquely good at and then stick in that lane. And there might be some offshoots, right? Like for us, we have digital and we have in-person. But when we try to do like on demand and all this other stuff, it's not what we're authentic about. And we weren't successful at it. We've lost a lot going that route. So don't treat your business like a hobby. Treat it like a business and you'll be more successful through that process. And finally, a really important piece that I think is important to touch base on is this idea of earned confidence. Did any of you guys see the Mike Tyson fight on the plane? Anybody see that? So I'm gonna use this as an example. Every day leading up to the CrossFit Games, I would remind myself, I'd wear a wristband that said earned on it. And what that meant to me is that when I sat on the bus with all these other gentlemen and ladies, there's a lot of people, it would remind me that no one gave me anything. I earned the right to be there just like the other people in that room. And we were all on a level playing field. And in business, I think it's really important to earn your confidence. And what that means is there's perceived and earned confidence. And what I think about every day in our business and what I think about as a parent, what I think about in every area is, am I earning the confidence versus perceiving it? The gentleman who was talking crap to Mike Tyson, he maybe had this perceived confidence that he thought maybe he could win in a fight. I'm totally assuming here, right? He could perceive all he wants, but the reality is that Mike Tyson has been training for decades to win at the sport of fighting. And the likelihood of him beating him was basically 0. And so when you approach business, something that I think about on a regular basis is, am I earning my confidence by putting in the hard work in the gym, outside the gym, to educate myself, to learn from new things, to learn from people, so that I know that when a difficult position comes up in our business, I'm able to overcome it. And COVID, for any of you who own a gym, has been the most incredible opportunity for us to earn our confidence. Because when things got really difficult and we were shut down, we overcame that as an industry. And now we're going to build off that earned confidence to go thrive in the future. So for those of you who maybe struggled the last couple of years, right now it's going to be the time to rally because you have that earned confidence to go crush it in the future. So focus on what's in your control. Work to stay positive. Make sure you're leaning on your why. Treat your business like a business and not a hobby. And ultimately, through all of that, you earn your confidence to go build something really special. That's what I got for 5 lessons that I've learned through COVID, pediatric cancer, competing at the CrossFit Games. I really appreciate being here. I appreciate Jason for inviting me. And I appreciate all of you guys for listening. So thank you very much.